Thank you all for coming, and I want to just mention that I just turned off my cell phone, just to mention that. Thank you, candidates, for running. This is public service, and you've stepped up to leadership. You all know what it means to serve. We are proud and thankful to have on our stage tonight the quality and diversity that we have here. Our goal here is to get to know you and explore your views on important issues so we can choose well. Think about it. One of you will be our congressman from this district. Excuse me, congresswoman. My apologies. Our representative from this district in 2017. We've worked to make this process open, but I will do my best to control the clock and the microphones tonight. Time limits must be respected, much like the rule of law, to keep the process fair. We ask our audience to limit their applause and excess enthusiasm. This is time taken from the candidates. Time is precious tonight, and we want to spend it listening to our candidates. Politics is a thoughtful, civil discussion, not a sporting event. We take our process and our politics serious business, because that's what it is. That said, humor is allowed within time limits. Our rules tonight are simple. The order of the opening and closing statements have been chosen by lot a few moments ago with those little wooden balls. Each candidate will have a 3-minute opening statement, and then we will proceed to questions. I'll be drawing the markers to determine the order of who will get the questions, and then the other candidates will get a chance, 1 minute, to respond. The idea of drawing it continuously like that is to keep the order random. We hope to get through all 10 questions. It will be a tight fit. The candidate getting each question will get 2 minutes and the other candidate 1 minute. Closing statements will begin at about 8:20 to give us time to wrap up by 8:30. Enthusiastic and lengthy applause is encouraged after all the closing statements are complete. After the forum, candidates are encouraged to stay and schmooze with the voters. We hope that we'll make more activists out of you, and I hope that each and every one of these candidates leaves with more volunteers than they came here with. So, we will be starting our first opening statement from David Gerson.
Good evening.
Excuse me, one more thing. Our timekeeper is in the front here. She has a 1 minute, a 30-second, and a 15-second marker, and then a stop. So, my apologies. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Is this working? Here we go. Good evening. My name is David Gerson, and I live in South St. Paul. I'm a Jewish conservative, and I will be one of the most conservative Jews to ever serve in Congress. But that is not the interesting story here tonight. The real story is how a grassroots army with merely a sling and 5 smooth stones forced a 7-term incumbent who was not representing us to retire. If we want to take this country back, we must acknowledge this. John Kline's voting record was undefendable, and his enabling of John Boehner's failed leadership unacceptable. In 2012, we put my name on the ballot to send a warning shot across the bow to Congressman Kline. Uphold your oath of office. Defend the Constitution. Represent our values. He didn't get the message. In 2013, we launched a real campaign, and in the 2014 Congressional District Convention, John Kline received endorsement by less than 3%. I honored that endorsement, and our grassroots movement grew. Kline knew we would receive the endorsement in 2016, and he announced his retirement this fall. The first endorsement that Ted Cruz received when he made his U.S. Senate run was that of the Madison Project. After forcing John Kline to retire, in September, we became one of only 9 candidates, including U.S. Senator Mike Lee, to receive the Madison Project endorsement. I have put my engineering career on hold and invested my life savings because I believe in this cause. You don't challenge a powerful incumbent like John Kline because you want to be a politician. This is a cause for me, not a job. This is not my campaign. This is our campaign. Quite frankly, we won't trust another political insider to represent us. None of the other candidates on this stage would stand with us against Kline and against the Washington establishment. They wouldn't even stand with us and recognize the importance and power of the grassroots. If we have learned anything from Speaker Boehner's resignation, it is that only outside pressure is going to bring change to Washington. We are demonstrating what a group of organized, passionate activists can do. I am not a political entertainer. I am not a career politician. I am a proud grassroots activist who has been fighting in the trenches alongside our citizen leaders like you. And while all may talk well, I was the only person in this race to stand with you in this difficult fight against Washington insiders. As Sam Adams famously said, it does not take a majority to prevail, rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting the brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. I am David Gerson, and I proudly stand with this generation's irate, tireless minority, and I am going to Congress to fight against the liberal agenda that is destroying our country and restore the promise that is America.
Thank you. Our second will be John Howe.
Thank you. Are we on? Hello? Hello? No.
Coming.
Are we on now? All right, fabulous. John Howe, I was born and raised in Minnesota on a farm here in Minnesota. Grew up with pretty humble beginnings. My youngest of 5 grew up on a farm without running water when my mom was, I thank my mom a lot. When Dad put running water into the barn, she made him bring it to the house, so it was really good. I don't know about where I grew up, but there was always, our farms were always set back a ways, and I still remember when I was different from everybody else. I was about 13, and the bus was waiting for me at the end of the driveway, and I ran down there to catch the bus, and one of the kids on the bus said, "What, John, you took too long in the shower?" And I said, "Shower? We don't have a shower." And they said, "Well, how do you wash your hair then?" And I said, "Well, I sit in the tub and I take a pitcher of water and I pour it over my head." And they all started laughing because they thought I made a funny or a joke. And that's when I realized that we weren't on the same level of everybody else. But I got to tell you, growing up in a farm, you know what a hard day's work is. And we had a very loving family. My dad worked very hard. My mom worked very hard. And I was the first of my family to be able to go to college. And I started working security and worked at a Department of Corrections, and I met my wife in 1989, spent 25 years with Sears, 10 on the corporate side doing loss prevention, and then I spent the next 15 years owning and operating my own store. And when you work at a store and you own your own business, you have to show up. 90% of life is showing up. And I understand what the regulations that businesses put, that government put on different businesses and things of that nature. But we are very blessed. We worked very hard. My wife worked very hard. We got 3 great kids, 1 in college, 1 in middle school, and 1 in high school. And we're very concerned about the debt in our country. And my wife is right alongside of me, supporting me in this venture. We know that the issues that are at stake in our country are too great. The debt that we're facing. Right now, we have $18 trillion in debt. We have $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities. We are borrowing money right now at $1 million a minute. Think about it. Just in the time that we've spoke here, how much more have we went in debt? We need to get it under control. And I want to go to Washington, D.C. to represent you. I would say that just don't listen to what comes out of someone's mouth. Look at how they live their lives personally. My wife and I, we live our lives very conservatively. I haven't taken out a personal loan since 1996. And it's not because it's not without a lot of hard work. I've put a personal commitment into this race. I'm going to work very hard to win this race. I've put a big financial commitment into this race. We know what we're facing on the Democratic side. One of the Democrats on the other side has put in over $1 million of their money into this race. It's going to take money to win the race. I need your support, not only as a delegate, I also need your financial support. I thank you very much for being here. It's great to see all of you here. My name is John Howe. My website is howeforcongress.com. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Next opening is David Benson-Stabler.
Hi. Hello. It's good? You got the microphone? All right, great. So my name is David Benson-Stabler. I'm also a Minnesotan by birth. And this election isn't about a particular ideology that I've been putting together over the span of my life.
Got to put it. Hold it really close.
Okay.
Really close, and then you can adjust it.
All right. So, it's not about a particular ideology. It's about common sense policies that are going to grow America for a great century to come. And that isn't the option that every... I think you could hear me anyway, right? No. This one works. So I don't know how we're going to do later, but I guess we're figuring that out.
Let's reset his time.
What am I at there? Anyway, I decided to get into this race because I was upset about what was going on, as I think we all are and should be, because the current administration has not chosen policies that really honor the people who have built this country and all of us who want the greatest success we can have in the century to come. It's about ideologies on the other side. I was in Italy when I read that Representative Kline was retiring, and I said, now is the time. I'm going to set aside business opportunities, setting up a business in Italy in technology. I'm going to go back to Minnesota, to the 2nd District that I love, that's beautiful. It's Twin Cities area. It's, maybe the best in Minnesota, but it's difficult to, make the other districts feel bad. It was a wonderful home for me at St. Olaf, where I was elected to the Honor Council. And what's going on in Italy? Okay, just to jump into that because I felt like that was an interesting fact. These people are showing up to Europe and saying, or they're not even, or they're just in the water. They're getting pulled out of the water. And they get 50 euros a day, plus housing, plus medical benefits, plus every other kind of European, Angela Merkel benefit you could imagine. Just all kinds of benefits for people wherever their homeland is. It's an economic migration. They don't tell you the right number that are coming in. They don't tell you about these benefits, the spending money. But if you go there now, you're going to see people with brand new clothes, iPads, all this other stuff, just because they showed up out of the sea and it's some kind of policy to take immigrants because it fits the liberal ideology. And is it eugenic? Is it they want left voters? Is it that there are lots of things going on, but it does not serve in a responsible way the electorate. And Hillary Clinton wants to make America more like these European policies and the Democratic candidates, down the line. So even if voters in the 2nd District say, well, I've always been a Democrat, and I think I'm gonna stick with them, we have to deliver that message that these policies are entirely unacceptable. And as we're gonna go through this debate, on every level, the Republican offering is better. And that's what I'm going to prove for us and win for us. Thank you.
Dr. Lewis.
Shall we wait till the mic works? Hi, everybody. My name's Wayne Newton. It is great to be here, Don, Larry, District 52. Thanks so much for putting this on. There hasn't been this much wisdom on one panel since Jefferson dined alone. I got to say, you all know my background, and I'm certain others will have comments on it as the night proceeds. But it's much more humbling than you might think. I was coming in here tonight, and somebody grabbed me at the door and they said, "I know you. I know who you are." And I thought, "Oh, good to be recognized. You're running for office. That's helpful." Didn't you used to have a talk show? Yeah, I had a talk show. You wrote a book, too, about federalism, right? Yeah. I think you did a bunch of GOP fundraisers. I'll say, yeah, I did all that. I'm thinking, I've got this guy's vote. And he stops for a second and he says, "Whatever happened to you anyway?" So you got your work cut out for you no matter where you start in this race or in any race, and that is as it should be. I really do believe that you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. The issues that keep you up at night, healthcare, spiraling healthcare premiums. The president told us they would go down by 2,500. The Kaiser Family Foundation says they're up by 4,800. A regulatory and tax burden unseen in modern history. A border that is, for all practical means and purposes, non-existent. All of those things. College tuition, going up faster than even healthcare, obviously gasoline and groceries. Nobody talks about the price gouging going on in higher education. Look, this is going to take bold leadership. And those same issues that keep you up at night are the very issues I got in the race to tackle. And I pledge to you, I'm not in this for my 15 minutes of fame. I've already had that. I'm not in it to have a microphone stuck in my face. I'm not in it for a job. I'm in it to actually change the country. You know, a lot of people up here tonight will tell you what it takes to get elected. What they need to tell you is what they are going to do after they get elected. Because that gets lost in these races. People do what they have to do to win the race, and then they go to Washington, and the status quo takes over. That's not going to happen with me. We're going to reform the tax code. We're going to have a flatter, fairer tax by eliminating corporate subsidies, by making certain people aren't cheating on the earned income tax credit, by eliminating the tax-exempt status for pro stadiums, by eliminating hedge fund carve-outs, renewable carve-outs. The reason your tax rate is 39.6% at the top federal rate is because some people, like General Electric, aren't paying any taxes at all. We're going to make everybody have skin in the game, and then we're going to have a flatter, fairer tax code, and I think 15% is just about right. We're going to make certain that young people can buy the kind of health insurance they need across state lines, not the kind the president thinks they ought to have. We're going to have health care reform, and we're going to control our borders. I promise you that. I cannot tell you how many GOP fundraisers I've done in the last few decades trying to raise money for this party. I can't tell you how many talk shows I've done over the last 20 years talking about public policy, but I can tell you this, now I'm ready to make it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and now it's time for Pam Myra.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank so much Senate District 52. Is this on? It is. Oh, great. I want to thank Senate District 52 for putting on this event, and also Gateway Christian Church. I know it was a lot of effort to make this happen. I'd like to introduce my husband, Chuck. He and I have been married for 34 years, and he is fully supportive of my candidacy and my public service. Ladies and gentlemen, this election is about trust. Who will you trust to represent you in Congress? Who will you trust to support and defend the values, the principles, the policies you hold dear? I'd like to share a story with you. One day when my oldest daughter was a little girl and she had just learned how to balance on her bicycle, she called to me with the most cheerful and happy voice, "Mommy, Mommy, look, I can drive just like you." I looked up from my gardening to see my little girl with only one finger on the bottom of her handlebars, waving to me as she flew by. And I said, "Honey, no, you gotta use two hands." The next day, as I was driving down the road, I happened to glance in my lap and realized she was right. She could drive just like me. I only had one finger on the bottom of my steering wheel. I was steering the car with one finger. It was just one moment in time, but it was a powerful lesson that I need to live what I say, to be principled and trusted. I served 2 terms in the Minnesota House of Representatives following the same principle of living what I say by consistently voting for our conservative values. In Congress, I will do the same. I will be your constitutional conservative, voting for our conservative values. I will be a person you can trust. I am running because of the compelling need to have congressional members who are trusted, experienced, dedicated, and there to serve you. As a mother and as a certified public accountant, I am running because we need to gain control over out-of-control federal spending. We need to reduce the interference of government in our lives. We need to protect our national security, rebuild the military, and return our country to a position of strength and leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is this a great stable of candidates or not? I want to apologize. I have messed up the agenda. I blew off the invocation and the pledge. And I also want you to know that there are bathrooms down the hall to the right, but please don't go through these doors. Go in through the back if you want to sneak out and do that. So at this time, I'd like to do the pledge and the invocation if the pastor's still around. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you that we live in a country where we are free. We thank you that we live in a country that can allow us to gather like this and to debate and to agree or disagree. We thank you for giving us the privilege to live in such a great nation. I ask you, God, that you would be here tonight. I pray, God, that you would lead this debate. I ask you, God, that you would help the candidate that you have chosen stick out. Lord, we thank you for this time we could come together. And we truly do ask that you would bless our great country. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Okay, at this point, we'll start off with the questions. I've been sitting here drawing numbers to get the order, trying to keep them random. So for this question, first one, the person to get the question is David Benson-Stabler. And the question is, what is the proper role of the federal government in K-12 education? What is the best way to change its current role to the proper role?
Well, that's a beautiful question. And it's an absolutely major opportunity for us to zero in on how we can ensure the best century to come. Minnesota, in my opinion, has the best schools in the country. Governor O'Malley said that Maryland was fantastic. Yeah, right. Massachusetts, okay, maybe, but is a competitor. But Minnesota really has it right. And we have, 50 laboratories of democracy. And I think states should explore, their own paths. I think that some states are going to choose to give credits to alternative education, whether it's in the form of charter schools or other forms of school choice. And I think that that could be a fantastic thing. I think there also has to be the right kind of rules in education And I think figuring out the right balance in policy that, that we can't, we could all imagine schools that would be unacceptable to be receiving public funds. So, breaking that barrier and saying that dollars could go to religious education schools, I think is a fantastic opening. And I have the courage to take that on. And at the same time, in a state like Minnesota where the public education is number one. And the path for Minnesota can be determined in Minnesota. And maybe, maybe it's going to be, in different states on the county level, where a particular county says, no, we're going to vote to keep schools just as they are. But we need to give people the opportunity to let their children receive the best education that's possible for the next century. Thank you.
Second up is David Gerson for a response of 1 minute.
The federal government has no business being involved in our children's education. We must return control of our children's education back to Minnesota's parents and teachers. And what's amazing is this is becoming a nonpartisan issue. The Democrats are starting to understand when you expand the size and scope of the federal government, you end up with one-size-fits-none solutions and unelected bureaucrats in D.C. that are uncontrollable and making the wrong decisions for our local communities. To be specific and answer the questions, we need to allow our states to opt out of No Child Left Behind and Common Core. We need to expand 529 accounts to K through 12, and we need to allow Title I portability.
Next up, Pam Myra.
I spent 5 of my first 6 years of life in Latin America. My first language was Spanish. I came to this country when I was 6 years old and really struggled in school. I didn't learn how to read until the 5th grade. Education is profoundly important to me because it is the door of opportunity. But the federal government should not be involved. Education is best when it's closest to home. I am strongly opposed to Common Core. And we should be, our states make better decisions, our local government, better decisions. I would be in favor of reducing the scope and size of the Department of Education. Thank you.
And Jason Lewis.
People have to understand the history here. When Jimmy Carter elevated the Office of Education to a cabinet-level department during his administration, it was a clear payback to whom? The National Education Association, the unions. $100 billion later, does anybody think they've done a good job or education has improved? We've got this epic battle when you've got federal education, from multiculturalism education to school to work to No Child Left Behind, now to Common Core. Title I funds. I mean, you can talk about Title I portability, but that's still money in education. So you've got to be realistic here. And what you need to do is you go to Washington and you say, unless the Department of Education reforms with school choice, unless they reform seniority at local districts that take their money, unless they do the things that need to be done, especially with collective bargaining reform, so that teachers don't have to join a union in order to teach, unless they do those things, we're going to return you back to an office and not a cabinet-level department. It's very simple. And of course, what you get when you have this Washington behemoth is you get things like Common Core. Even though that was a state invented program, the federal government now has incentive money to it. Obviously, most of us here are against Common Core. I noticed my friend John Howe, however, supported Common Core on votesmart.org, and I'd be interested in his response on that.
And John Howe.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. That's one of the, I'm all about reducing government's footprint, and certainly the Department of Education we can reduce, and if we could eliminate it, that would be great. I am a big believer in vouchers for parents. Parents know where their kids can be taught best, and if we had school vouchers, your public schools would face competition. And competition, I'm a free market guy. I grew up and I ran Sears stores. When you're in retail, you need to be better than your competitor. And having school choice, having vouchers for parents, would allow charter schools, religious schools to compete with the public schools. And it will not destroy our public schools. It'll make them better. And that's my viewpoint on it.
Thank you. I want to take a moment to remind our candidates to keep a sharp eye on Kathy Roberts here and the times. And when you hear that little ding ding, it's time to stop. I don't want to have to turn off microphones, even the ones that don't work. So, next question, number 2, is very similar to the first. What is the proper role of the federal government in the area of energy? And what is the best way to change its current role to its proper role? And for that, we go first to Jason Lewis.
Well, it's another Jimmy Carter era invention. The Department of Energy was going to make us energy independent. We know how that turned out. If it weren't for the private sector and fracking, as they like to call it, why we wouldn't have gasoline prices where they are. It had nothing to do with government policy. A123, which went under, Cylinder, which went under, windmills in Goodhue County, which the public doesn't want there, but yet they were getting a wind production tax credit, 30% investment credit for solar. Let me tell you what the federal role ought to be. It ought to be hands-off as much as possible, but to the degree they do regulate, they need to treat everybody fairly. So we can't build a pipeline, which is much safer than Warren Buffett's trains. Gee, I wonder why. Well, Warren Buffett happens to be a friend of the president. We've got 42,000 jobs with the Keystone XL pipeline on the hook, and they took it off. And by the way, that 42,000 number came from the State Department analysis of Keystone. They also said at the State Department that it wouldn't have any effect on so-called global warming, and yet this president said, we don't need private sector investment like the Keystone pipeline, we need public sector investment, as though they would know better. This is the problem with energy. There's been too much government and not enough free market capitalism.
Next up is David Gerson.
This is really a simple answer. There's nothing that can determine our energy policy better than the free markets. It's simple. The federal government, bureaucrats can't do it. We understand that there's going to be regulations and tax incentives that are going to be put in place through special interests and lobbyists, and there's going to be nothing better for the American people than to allow the free markets to determine the best way to supply our energy needs. We need to eliminate the renewable fuel standards and every other subsidy and every other regulation that's out there.
Next up, 1 minute for John Howe.
Thank you, Don. Department of Energy, there's another one that we could work towards eliminating. We have Harry Reid and President Obama has kept Yucca Mountain from opening up, and we've got 2 nuclear storage sites in Minnesota here, and we've got nuclear storage that's going to be stranded all across our nation. And the General Accounting Office say now plan for on-site storage temporarily for the next 300 to 500 years. That doesn't sound very temporary, does it? 300 to 500 years, but that's what they're telling us. And so we don't have a good energy policy, and certainly we need to be energy independent. We should eliminate all the subsidies and let things stand on their own. I'm in favor of the XL pipeline. How many out there are? We need to get it done. We got a president that's not allowing it to get done, and that would certainly help us with our energy production. Certainly, Canada is our friend and our neighbor, and we should allow the oil to flow back in. That would also help oil from the North Dakota Balkan too to flow. So there's a lot of things we can do on energy.
Thank you. And up fourth is Pam Myra.
There isn't a proper role for the federal government in energy. Federal government distorts markets, picks winners and losers. We should have a free market. We should not be having all the subsidies that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. She yields her time back to good practice. And last is David Benson-Stabler.
I also think that the federal government should do less encumbering work in energy. I wouldn't seek to take apart the Department of Energy. I think that there is some regulation to be done as far as Keystone goes. It could be, I could support it, but I would also say that it would be nice to have the concern of the Ogallala Aquifer satisfactorily addressed, because that's a national issue. It's a major aquifer, and our aquifers are important beyond, the profits of one pipeline. And it's important that we have a robust energy industry throughout the world. It's a very, very important part of our society, and we need to support that.
Thank you, sir. Our third question goes first to Pam Myra, and that is, with over 11 million illegal immigrants here and many more coming, what legislation would you propose to address those immigrants here and those that may come illegally in the future?
Let's talk about 11 million people. That's a lot of families. It's a lot of families. The immigration issue is a big concern because of national security. We need to know who's coming into our country. I don't know about you. Actually, I do. I think I do. I never go to bed at night leaving my front door open. I always lock the door. I always close the door. And our country should be no different. We need to secure our borders. We need to enforce our laws. As far as the 11 million people are here, we need to prioritize who is deported. We need to focus on those people who are violent and are breaking the law. Now, the individuals that are left, should we allow amnesty? No, no. It's been tried in 1986, and all it did was encourage additional people to enter our country illegally. Should there be a way for them to have citizenship? Yes, but they need to go to the back of the line. It's simply not fair for the other people who are following the law and trying to become citizens of our country. There's also the issue of anchor babies. We are only one of 2 developed countries in the world that allow a person, illegal parents, to give birth to a child and have them have immediate citizenship. I understand Representative King has a bill, and I would look through that, and I'm thinking I would support it, that would put an end to illegal aliens being able to have their children become citizens automatically. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jason Lewis.
The fundamental problem is you can't have open borders with a welfare state. You go back to the 1982 Plyler decision where the Supreme Court said that illegal immigrants are entitled to education at public expense. 1985, the Emergency Medical Act mandated that nonprofit hospitals treat illegal immigrants. Now we have the Citizenship Clause, which Pam refers to, where the Supreme Court has interpreted the 14th Amendment to mean anybody who is illegal here but has a child under the jurisdiction or born under the jurisdiction thereof is now a citizenship. The problem is, of course, illegal immigrants aren't under anybody's citizenship or anybody's jurisdiction, I should say, least of all the United States. So there's a great court fight going on with that. Look, we're going to have to do something here. Europe is finding out what open borders do to a continent. We're finding out in a very ugly way. It costs us, just on the fiscal side, $113 billion a year, most of that, about $85 billion, borne by the states in education, in medical costs, in corrections. Now, the question always comes up in these debates is, well, you can't deport 11 million people. No, but you can, when you catch them, you can send them back. Nobody's suggesting we have the resources to go around and catch 11 million people. But when we catch them by attrition for anything, we can send them back because, Pam, they came here illegally. It's not that they came here and committed a crime. When they got here, they'd already committed a crime. And so my view on this is we absolutely have to control the borders, and if that means erecting some sort of wall, I'm all for it.
Thank you, sir. Next up is David Gerson.
When it comes to immigration policy, we have to benefit this country and our current residents as a whole. I'm going to Congress, and I'm going to look out for the best interests of the citizens of our district. We need to ensure that our immigration policy fosters upward mobility and patriotic assimilation, not balkanization and welfare dependency. We need to remain as Reagan's shining city on the hill and the beacon of liberty for the free world. That means no amnesty, no path to citizenship, securing our southern border, visa tracking as half of illegals are visa overstays, workplace enforcement, eliminating anchor babies, following the current laws, blocking transportation for funding of sanctuary cities, eliminating DACA, ending additional child tax credits, and deporting criminals. Over 30% of the population of the federal prisons are illegal immigrants.
Thank you, sir. Next up is David Benson-Stabler.
Hi. Well, as I mentioned, the European problem is an example of the wrong direction to go, and it is the direction that the Democrats want to go in. We do have to secure the border. I would support a deportation force. I think it's a great idea because there is so much work to be done. I think that this country should grow. I think that we should grow by population. I think families should be supported. Motherhood should be supported. We've done a lot of work as a society in the past 100 years, making sure that women can be as great as they can be in professional accomplishments. At the same time, we're living longer, and women can live another half of their life after raising a family at this point. So to say that we need to be encouraging women to focus immediately on their careers is something that is part of this population conversation.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Howe.
Well, I think you've heard it all already. First, we need to secure our borders. Everybody talks about it, but we actually have to do something about it. You know, you hear what Donald Trump talks about, building a wall. We need to secure our borders, and it isn't just talk. We have to do it. Then, you know, for the people that are here, they need to pay fines, and they need to begin the process of trying to legally get processed into becoming a legal citizen. But, and you've heard it before, and I've talked about it before, we need to address sanctuary cities in our United States. If you've got cities, and we have some right here in our state, that offer sanctuary cities where if they get stopped in a criminal activity, the police can't identify them, whether they're not a United States citizen or not, they shouldn't get federal funding. You want to have a sanctuary city? Go for it. But you're not going to get federal funding because you're violating the law of the United States. And we need to address it, and we can't just give it lip service. Thank you.
Thank you all. I want to change the protocol just a hair. I'm going to tell you who's going to get and then who's next, just to give you a few moments to prepare, at least mentally. And I also want to start interrupting just a little bit if you're going over. I'll start by interrupting myself before I do this with the microphone. So we want to keep on track. So first up with question 4 is John Howe, followed by David Benson-Stabler. And question 4 is, what do you think should be... I'm sorry. Question 3. No, question 4. What do you think should be done with Obamacare and our health care system?
Obamacare, otherwise known as the Affordable Care Act. How many people in here got to keep their health plan that they had that the president said? I didn't. One person. I see one person got to keep their health. Well, 2. When the president said, don't worry, you get to keep your doctor and you get to keep your health plan, he should be impeached for that. It was just a lie. We didn't get to keep our health plan. And one of the things you heard me talk about, I'm a free market guy. We need competition. Competition is what we don't need a single payer system. We need more competition in the marketplace. I live in Red Wing. I live in Goodhue County. Anybody else out here from Goodhue County? All right, how many choices do we have in Goodhue County? One. One choice in Goodhue County. Go to Dakota County, you've got a lot more choices. In Goodhue County, it's very, very expensive for our health insurance. My plan is a $4,000 deductible, and I think it's $11,000 for our family. And we pay high premiums. So what we need to do is we need to eliminate the Affordable Care Act. We need to go back to having competition and being able to buy health insurance across state lines. And I ran into problems with this with my Sears stores. I've had, we just didn't have competition in the marketplace, and that's where we need to go back to. And I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, next up is David Benson-Stabler, and then followed by Pam Myra.
Hello. I think that the healthcare system absolutely needs to be, the health insurance system needs, Obamacare, Affordable Care Act needs to be repealed and replaced. And I'm still listening to, various proposals about what it should be replaced with. I think that way too much money is spent on healthcare, and I think that that's sort of a concern, a point at which to approach this. At the same time, there's a quality of care, and there is, money that Americans are spending for new technologies and therapies to be developed that the world benefits from, that they may not be paying their fair share for. So we have to figure out a way to address the fact that we pay so much more than other countries for our health care, and maybe we can find a way for the industry to improve in the replacement.
Okay, Mrs. Myra.
Thank you. Obamacare should be repealed in its entirety, completely, and it needs to be done right away. What should it be replaced with? It should be replaced with a patient-centered, free market plan. We should be able to buy our health care just like we buy our car insurance. We should be able to pick what characteristics, what qualities about it that we want. I have heard of so many men telling me that they have OBGYN coverage on their plans. Ridiculous. It should also include, the federal government should equalize the tax treatment between those who get their health care through their employer and those who buy individually. Our programs, our health should be allowed to be portable so we can take it from one job to the next, and we should be able to own it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now David Gerson, followed by Jason Lewis.
First of all, it is absolutely shameful that Congress has voted themselves an exemption to Obamacare. Our founding fathers never intended there to be career politicians. They expected people to go to Congress and serve and come back home and live under the laws that they created. It has been set up through the reconciliation process, which passed Obamacare, to completely eliminate Obamacare. And H.R. 3672, which partially defunds Obamacare, will not pass the Senate parliamentarian. We need a one-sentence, full repeal of Obamacare through the reconciliation process.
You can talk about repealing Obamacare, but that gives us the status quo, what we had before when we got Obamacare. Now, what liberals will tell you time and again is the market failed in health care. Folks, we haven't had a free market in health care since World War II wage and price controls. When the government said, oh, you can't give your employee a raise, so what did they do? they started giving people health care. Then we changed the tax code in the 1950s where companies could deduct the health care premiums, but you couldn't as an employee. Pretty soon, if you didn't have a job, you didn't have health care. We need to buy health insurance, the kind we want. This is enrollment period, the scariest time of the year. Prices have gone up $4,800, as I said earlier, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation since 2008, not down $2,500. And the reason is, especially young people cannot buy the plan they want. They've got to buy wellness child visits. They've got to have gambling addiction coverage for Mormons. They've got to have maternity stays for single guys. The essential health benefits have so jacked up the cost of health insurance that what the liberals have done effectively made it out of our reach, but's promised to subsidize us on the back end. That is not healthcare freedom. We're finding out, indeed, that healthcare or free healthcare is not very free at all. You've got to redo the whole thing going all the way back a few decades and return healthcare to the free market.
Thank you all. For our next question, number 5, we'll start with David Gerson, followed by Pam Myra. And the question is, it is said that Social Security Trust Fund will run out of money in a few years. What do you think should be done, if anything, with the Social Security program?
We absolutely have to uphold our commitments to seniors and those who are close to retirement. But we have to understand that the unfunded liabilities of Social Security is not maintainable, and we have to start making some difficult choices. What we need to do is we need to start having some reasonable means testing, and we need to slowly increase the retirement age for those that aren't close to retirement so that they can properly plan for it. We owe this to the next generation. We owe it to ourselves. It is so important that we tackle this mandatory spending. Currently, 66% of today's current budget is mandatory spending. In 11 years, all of our budget will be comprised of mandatory spending and interest on the debt. The longer we wait to tackle this problem, the more of a problem it's going to become and the more painful of a solution for those that will be affected. We need courageous leaders that will go to Congress today and deal with this problem before it's too late.
Thank you. Next up, Pam Myra, followed by John Howe.
I'm a certified public accountant, and during the summertime, I took 3 classes on Social Security as continuing professional education. And I was stunned. I was stunned by what I heard by national leaders. They said that there are solutions and that Congress hasn't acted on any of them. Congress hasn't acted on any of them. We absolutely must work on these possible solutions. Our expenditures, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest will overcome our revenues by 2030. We have to address these issues. We must. It's not an issue of our children and grandchildren are going to have to deal with this. Folks, we're going to have to deal with this. Thank you.
Mr. Howe, followed by Jason Lewis.
The Washington bureaucrats have looted the Social Security fund. They've taken the money and spent it somewhere else. And now the people that have paid into the fund, they want to take it away from them. The people who have paid into the Social Security fund, it's their money. We owe it to them and we should pay it to them. But then we need to start changing. We need to change, we need to develop a higher way or a higher age for when you start receiving it. You need to start doing some means testing. And certainly I'm a big believer that we should let people have private investment accounts so they can invest some of that money themselves. But we're going to have to completely revamp it. But talking right now about taking away the money that people have paid into it, that's not right. That's the money that people have paid in. So we're going to have to find a way to make sure the money that's paid in is paid out to the people who have paid it in. But we're going to have to change it for the future. And it's not going to be an easy task.
John and David, you could not be more wrong on means testing. This is exactly taking away the money that people have paid into it. If you means test, and even FDR understood this when this was created, you turn Social Security into a welfare program. And if you want to undercut support for Social Security in the future, you turn it into a welfare program. You won't have any support. Now, the facts are these. The trust fund runs out in 2034. The Democrats would say, well, let's just lift the tax cap so the wealthy can bail us out. If you lifted the tax cap, the FICA tax on the first $118,000 you earn, if you lifted that to no limit at all, you only bail out 45% of the problem. So you can't just solve it by taxes. If you don't do anything, then your benefits in 2034 will be 75% of what they are today. So something's got to be done, but means testing or lifting the cap on taxes is not the answer. The answer is turning COLA benefits into a chained CPI and raising the retirement age for younger workers. It's not a difficult problem if you do that. Nobody's talking about people currently on the system or people close to it. We're talking about younger people working longer as they live longer, and we're talking about a different CPI. You do those two things, you preserve the system without turning it into a welfare system.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Benson-Stabler.
This is an important topic, especially when we get to the point where we're reaching out to undecided voters and to bring over Democrats to our side, because they're going to be spreading lies that we're going to be taking away your Social Security money now, or that people about to retire are going to have to keep working longer. And nobody here, and I haven't heard a single presidential candidate say that as well. So the truth is that yes, we do have to figure out, make some tough decisions about, raising the age and actually, eventually a generation or two down. And it's maybe not unfair because people are living longer and are fully able to work longer. So it's an important matter that we, are serious, and we don't lose the ground here that what we want to do as a party is to be responsible about this necessary program.
Thank you all. Moving on to question 6. Should the United States government continue to fund the Middle East wars? If not, why not? This question goes first to Pam Myra, then to David Gerson, followed by John Howe.
Let there be no mistake. We need a strong military. We need to protect our national security. We need to return our country to a position of strength and leadership. As far as funding in the Middle East, we need to look out for our country's interests. I am opposed to putting boots on the ground in Syria. At this point, no. We need to be looking at our own country's interests.
Thank you. Mr. Gerson.
First of all, let's talk about our commander-in-chief. Obama is leading from behind, and he's leaving a void of leadership in this world that is extremely dangerous. He won't even define who the enemy is. We have to face the fact that it is radical Islam. Before America engages in any conflict, it is owed to the American people that we define exactly how this is in our vital interest. We have a defined and achievable goal with a known exit strategy, and that there is no mission creep. And finally, Congress is the only body that can declare war. We have to stop abdicating responsibility to the executive branch.
Thank you, sir. And now we have John Howe, followed by David Benson-Stabler and Jason Lewis.
Again, I think this comes back to our national debt that we're carrying. Part of the reason that we don't have a fully funded military is because we can't afford to. And we need to. Our Navy fleet is running about at half as what it should be. Certainly the Middle East is a hotbed, and certainly we need to pay attention and we need to be involved and we need to take steps. We certainly don't want to see what happened recently in Paris to happen here. And so we have to be involved. It's unfortunate, but we have state-sponsored terror from radical Islam. We have Iran. I certainly wouldn't be doing a deal with Iran like the president's doing. I mean, you have Iran chanting death to America, and then we're doing some kind of a deal with them on nuclear arms. Once they become a nuclear state, we're really going to be in trouble. So we have to pay attention to that.
Okay. Now, some of the candidates here, Ms. Myra, Mr. Gerson, Mr. Lewis, are a bit restrictive about what the U.S. engagements can be. I firmly believe, as Dick Cheney recently put it, that America is exceptional when it comes to global security. And we need to make sure that America is not fronting a bill that we can't afford and that the other world is not providing their necessary share towards. But at the same time, there can be no freedom on earth for terrorists. We have that capability, and we need to maintain that. This president has facilitated the Islamic State of terror, and the attacks on Friday are exactly what they started from day one to do. And the surge had secured the zone before the president allowed this to take place.
And Mr. Lewis.
Let me give you an example of what's wrong here. We've got tens of thousands, at one point it was up to 200,000 Syrian refugees that John Kerry and Barack Obama mandated were coming back to America. There was a report out today said that approximately 52% of those were male. Many of those were able-bodied adult males. Now think of the specter of this. We're going to take those refugees infused with ISIS, we're going to take them back here, and then we're going to send our young adult males to go fight their war. Something's wrong with this picture, folks. If they're fleeing their country, maybe the able-bodied young men ought to stay and fight. We can give them aid and support, but it's their country and it's their fight. I am tired, sick and tired of America fighting other wars that our allies should be contributing to, and I'm not going to support that. Now, of course, you support something when a national security stake is at risk. So you've got to do three things in the current regime, real quickly. You've got to secure the borders, as we talked about, and that includes no on Syrian refugees. And 3 weeks ago, during the public television debate, I made that point about nothing or no Syrian refugees before Paris. This isn't rocket science, people. But you've got to focus on the real enemy, and the real enemy right now, I hate to break it to you, is not Assad, it's not even Putin, it's ISIS. They're fighting them. We shouldn't be hindering their efforts.
Thank you. Next question, number 7, goes first to John Howe, followed by Pam Myra, and then David Gerson. And it is, as you know, the federal government is deeply in debt, and that debt continues to grow because we are unable to balance the federal budget. What is your plan to balance the budget and pay down the federal debt?
Well, certainly, we all know where we're sitting with our debt. That, you know, the experts say once we get to about $23 trillion in debt, we're not going to be able to service our interest on our debt. We need to reduce our government spending. It isn't a question of how much revenue we're taking in, it's a question of how much we're spending. And certainly we put some things in place. I'm for a balanced budget amendment. I think we should have that. And, you know, we put measures in place for sequestering. And what you've seen this last couple weeks, what did we do? We kicked the can down the road. We raised the debt ceiling. We gave Obama a blank check. I think in one sweeping move, we added another almost $900 billion to our debt. So it took us right up to $19 trillion. I need to change what I'm talking about here. I always say $18 trillion. So now we're almost $19 trillion in debt. We have to take measures. We have to have that sequestering in place. We need to start cutting things down. You know, if we don't do something about it, we're going to be facing austerity measures just like Greece faced. And so we can't just continue to borrow money. It's going to take us completely underwater. you can see how it affects every relationship we have. It affects how we fund our national defense. It affects how we trade with our partners. We can't be strong on China on our trade deficit because we need them to buy our debt. We owe them $1.7 trillion right now. And so if I'm elected, I want to go to Washington, D.C. to work on the debt. I know finances. I live my life very conservatively, and I'll make sure that we do the right thing in Washington.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Myra.
You can applaud.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that governments do is on the state basis, on the federal, is they use baseline budgeting. What that means is whatever they spend in the year, they just tack on interest and a factor for population growth. And there is always a push right at the end of the fiscal year to spend all the money that's in the budget. So they get that plus. And it just keeps on growing and growing. One of the things that we can do is go to zero-based budgeting. What that allows or requires is that you justify why you have so much money. That is one of the things we can do. I also believe rather than just arbitrarily saying we're going to cut everything 20%, what we do is go in there and look at those programs that are good and keep those, and the ones that are failing, literally failing, we need to cut them out.
Thank you, ma'am. And we have David Gerson, followed by David Benson-Stabler, and then Jason Lewis.
You know, our founding fathers were so wise. If you read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, they predicted almost everything that this country would experience as problems. And as wise as they were, they could never predict that Congress would willingly abdicate their responsibilities. Congress absolutely has the power of the purse. James Madison said there is no better means of regress, and we have given up that power to the executive branch. It doesn't matter what plan you have to save money and hold us to a budget if you're not going to send representatives that are willing to go to Congress and use their powers. We need to take back our powers from the executive branch. We need to not allow treaties to be considered executive agreements. We need to be declaring war, and most importantly, we need to be using the power of the purse.
I agree that we have to get the spending in line. It's a massive problem, and we do have Puerto Rico within the United States with an incredible debt problem at present, and we do have a lot of cuts, I think, as a party in mind, generally speaking, and a lot of plans to put control of funding and programming back on the state level. So by reducing the federal government as a whole, we're going to dramatically change the situation. As far as the budget amendment, balanced budget amendment goes, there is the issue of an exception for wartime because we're basically quite frequently, almost always at war. So we'd have to work with the definition on that issue if we're going to do that successfully.
Believe it or not, we were cutting spending. Obama fell into it with the 2011 debt ceiling deal and budget sequestration. He promised a task force that would get things done. It didn't, so we kicked in budget sequestration, 10% across the board in social welfare spending, including Pentagon bloat, and was actually eliminating a lot of the programs on the welfare side and on the Pentagon side. For instance, Abrams tanks that the Army says they don't use anymore, they don't need anymore, but the Congress still appropriates them. But what happened? Well, the budget sequester was working so well and cutting so much spending that they undid it a couple of weeks ago, and it was Republicans and Democrats that undid it. We can talk about a balanced budget amendment. We can talk about a federal spending limitation amendment, but what's lacking in Washington on spending is courage. The courage to stand up and say no to constituents and special interests who want something for free. And maybe term limits is the only way we get there, so that I don't have to depend on pleasing somebody with somebody else's money all the time.
Thank you all. Question 8. We're doing real well on time here. We're not quite going to make 10, I don't think, but we're doing well. The U.S. has one of the highest corporate tax rates and relies on the personal income tax to finance most of the federal government. What initiatives and or policies do you intend to support to improve our tax system? This goes first to David Benson-Stabler, then Jason Lewis, followed by David Gerson.
As I mentioned when I first spoke, it's vitally important that we have successful businesses. We want to ensure that we're a successful, secure country. And we have to absolutely lower our corporate tax codes and income tax codes. There has to be incentive for work. In too many situations, we have people who are better off, on dependency type situations. And that's horrible. As a society, to say that there are going to be workers and then this group of takers is absolutely a horrible problem. And by bringing the tax codes down, we are going to have more businesses do more of their business in America. It is a big situation that people can operate in the global sphere from another country or in the United States, and when our tax code's higher, it's an obvious reason to, technically base operations somewhere else. So as far as repatriating the money that's abroad, and there's a huge amount of money to bring back and invest in American businesses, I think, there could be some amount that's taxed. I don't think that we should have a holiday, because that just plays into a permanent holiday, unless we could find a way to. And I think a certain amount of tax to bring that money back keeps businesses saying that America is their best choice to run a business of any size.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Look, we all know what the problem is with the tax code. It was 27 pages when it was implemented in 1913. Today it's 4 million words, including the corporate income tax. We're seeing tax inversions like Medtronic and others. I used to think the double Irish was a drink. Actually, it's now a tax inversion plan. And you're not going to get the money coming back, the trillions of dollars overseas, until you get a better return on capital. Money is going to chase the highest return on capital, and right now, 35% tax code, it's one of the highest corporate income taxes in the world. So we've got to get that down, but you can't get it down if you have carve-outs to General Electric, who've got $839 million in credits and pay no income tax, if you got renewable subsidies or renewable carve-outs, hedge fund managers paying their commissions at capital gains instead of ordinary rates. And I'll tell you something else I would do. I would eliminate tax-exempt bonds for professional sports stadiums that benefit private actors at the federal level. Because when they don't pay that tax, those bondholders, you pay a higher rate. And so do corporations. So you've got to get the loopholes out and get the flat rate down so that everybody's got skin in the game.
Moving on. Thank you. Mr. Gerson, followed by John Howe, and then Ms. Myra.
Look, the tax system is a perfect example of what's wrong with Washington. The tax system works for the insiders and those that have the resources to lobby our politicians. It doesn't work for the people. I am a supporter of Dan Mitchell's flat tax. He's from the Cato Institute. It eliminates all special interest carve-outs. We need to eliminate these special interest deductions. We need to free up the entrepreneurs in America, the small businesses that are being overwhelmed by these tax codes and disincentives. And that's what's going to bring back a vibrant economy.
Thank you, sir.
we have a very high corporate tax, and it chases a lot of corporations overseas, and it chases people to buy corporations in another country so they can lower their effective tax rate. We have a 73,000-page tax code. It needs to be much simpler. We have it just about exactly backwards. We should encourage savings, investing, and earning savings and investing, and we should tax consumption. When I was a Minnesota senator, I proposed to eliminate the personal income tax in Minnesota and go to a straight consumption tax. Now, Governor Dayton didn't like it because it was revenue neutral. My plan was revenue neutral. It didn't provide more revenue, so Governor Dayton didn't like it. He wanted more revenue. The Republicans didn't like it because it didn't fit with their no new taxes pledge. But that's what we should do. We should have a consumption tax, not an income tax. Now, I don't support using taxpayer funds for stadiums. I voted no on the stadium bill that went to the governor's desk because I didn't care if it was user fees, but not taxpayer funds. And if anybody tells you what that stadium's going to cost you, it's going to be $1 billion when you figure in the finance costs and the bonding costs. You know, a lot of times you look at government projects and you don't realize it. Oh, we've got the money to do this, but what are the operating costs? What's the long-term cost on it? Are we done? All right. You had the 30-second sign showing there. I didn't see the stop sign.
Sign up. Yeah. Go ahead.
I am opposed to any new sources of taxes. If we were to add a consumption tax, we should have an amendment to our Constitution, because otherwise what would happen is you'd have a consumption tax, and then before you know it, you turn around and you'd have an income tax as well. And we would be having taxes coming out of our ears. I really believe that we have got to get our federal spending under control. It is so critical. And when, as a family, you're having struggles paying the mortgage, or you're going into bankruptcy, that's probably not the best time to decide to make a change in your job. I don't believe that when we are having such a difficult time in balancing the budget that we should be making huge changes in our tax code. But we should bring those rates down for everybody. But first, we have got to address out-of-control federal spending.
Okay, thank you all. I want to pause at this moment. We're at 8:17. I had planned to wrap this up at 8:20. We have 2 more questions left. It's taking about 10 minutes per. This will take us a few minutes over. Does the crowd and do our candidates want to run one more question, or do we want to wrap it up and get out of here? One more? One more. Let's do one more. Question number 9. One great need in our politics is to counter the narrative of the left that condemns restraint, discipline, frugality, and anything that gets in the way of their progressive agenda. What will you do to lead the voters to understand and accept the need to say no much more often to solve our budget problems? And this goes first to Jason Lewis, then to David Gerson, and then David Benson-Stabler.
Well, real quickly, first thing you do is start scrutinizing what's going on in so-called higher education today. We've got speech codes. We've got speech police in higher ed that are telling those conservatives saying no, that we can't afford this or that, or you ought to be responsible, that offends somebody, and therefore they risk losing their education. That is an outrage given the fact that many of these are state schools getting state subsidies of 3/4 of their budget plus tuition subsidies with Pell Grants. We ought to haul these people. Can you imagine the prices of higher ed today as well? $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a year. If this were ExxonMobil, they'd be hauled in front of the Attorney General for price gouging. Nobody's talking about that. I will when I get to Washington. Now let's have some fun and correct the record here a little bit. The problem with the consumption tax, especially for you seniors out there, is after a lifetime of paying income taxes, now you're going to get hit with a 23% consumption tax at the federal level. How are you liking that so far? It'll turn businesses into tax collectors. That's not the way to go, folks, in this election. And second of all, I would say, John, in your sales tax hike of $800 million that you were negotiating with Governor Dayton, the Senate majority leaders said there were no offsets in the bill. It was just a pure tax increase. So there was no move to abolish the income tax. And my old buddy John Howe was the swing vote in the Senate Taxes Committee to get the Viking Stadium on the floor. In fact, chief sponsor Julie Rosen said John Howe was the swing vote in the Taxes Committee that got the Vikings bill to the floor. Now, he then voted against it, so I guess he was for it before he was against it. But let's just get the record straight here, gentlemen.
I don't want to digress, but Don, I didn't think we were going to have personal attacks here, but I'm going to tell you, the only reason I voted for that was for user fees, and I think that...
I think we're a little off script. You'll get a minute to respond in a short while.
Well, then we won't get to answer the question.
Mr. Gerson.
Well, I think that the left is starting to see what happens with government overreach in education. And they're starting to learn that local control is what we need if we're going to be a successful society. And they start to understand what government overreach really means and these one-size-fits-all solutions. And they can't no longer go down and talk to their school board. They can't even go to St. Paul. How do you reach out to Washington, D.C.? We're seeing the same thing with transportation. Who can better determine your transportation needs than local and states? So I think they're starting to recognize that this liberal big government isn't working.
I appreciate the question, and I think we've missed the real sense of it to a certain extent, which is, how would I, as your representative, make sure that we focus on a culture of work and productivity, and that we stand up to abuse, and to a certain extent, the question also looks at the left and how the left turns a blind eye and is encouraging basically that people can have programs to their fill so long as they vote left. And we do need to, one particular example is that I think is kind of wasteful, and it's not going to help me with the prison industry, but I think it's outrageous that we spend in some states $100,000 per prisoner. We should be moving towards them contributing while they're serving time.
And Pam Myra, and then John Howe. My apology.
Caught me off guard. I think what we really need to do is really lay it out for the voters. Tell them what's at stake. Be honest. In 2010, I ran for the very first time. I hadn't done that ever before, but I was so concerned about the political process and what was happening in my House district and in the state. So I ran for office, and I went and door-knocked 12,000 homes and connected and communicated with the folks in my area. And a lot of Democrats voted for me because I was able to talk to them, and they knew that I was listening. And in 2012, the presidential year, I won again. And that's because people could see from my record that I lived what I said. I voted as I said I would. And they trusted me. And in trusting, that is how you have other people support your candidacy.
Thank you. Mr. Howe.
Well, I'm certainly glad Jason sees me as the candidate to beat here tonight. I like that. I would say I'm a personal accountability and personal responsibility guy. I know when to say no. You look at my life, call me. My phone number is 651-278-4693. You've got a question with anything I did as a senator, I'll answer to it. When I served in the Senate, I never missed a Senate vote. I showed up. 90% of life is showing up and being accounted for. I never took a day off. When it came to the tax committee vote, I was fortunate enough to be on the tax committee, like I said. But I was voting for that stadium when it was user fees only. Now, Mr. Jason walked off his radio show and started this gold coin thing. I invested in it. I don't know. I got like 20,000 coins or however many. I want to know what happened to that. That was more like a Ponzi scheme than anything else. I've never heard what's going on with that. Now he's here looking for a job, and he's beating me up, right? Great. Let's find out, guys. Thank you.
Thank you well. Thank you all. I think
we hit a nerve.
Thanks for the last question, Don.
I wish I wish I had the opportunity to express a few of my own, but I can't do that as moderator, and I'm not going to. I do want to say at this point, we've gone through 9 of the questions. Too bad we can't get the 10th, but at this point, we're going to pass the hat. If you like this event, if you want to support us, please donate. We'll be passing some baskets around. If you're going to write checks, make them out to Senate District SD 52, Senate District 52. We thank you all for coming. This is an absolutely, I was hoping we would have a problem having more people than chairs. That's what we've got. This is great. Thank you for coming. Now we do the closing statements for all the candidates, and we will start with 2 minutes each. 2 minutes each. Starting with Jason Lewis, then David Gerson, then John Howe, then Pam Myra, and then David Benson-Stabler, as they picked their own lots there, so I had nothing to do with that. So,
well, thank you very much. You bet. Thank you. I didn't realize we were going to have personal attacks in this debate. I'm shocked. I'm telling you, shocked. Shocked. Actually, we should look into that Senate Taxes Committee vote, John, because that did not have user fees. That was the final bill that went to the floor. So let's just get a little research on that. But look, the bottom line is this. We need somebody in Washington that is going to be trustworthy, that you know where they stand and you know won't back down. Contrary to what John says, I really don't need a job. I was very happy retired. And you know what? I decided to jump into this race because I didn't see anybody else that was going to take it to the opposition like I thought I could. And that's what the framers want. They want a candidate whose views best represent the district, who's electable, and who's going to take it to the opposition in our case. I intend to do that. And I intend to do it because I'm going to serve the country first. I'm not going to be a candidate that brings home the pork. I promise you that. I'm going to be a candidate and a congressman that cuts the pork. You don't serve the country first by bringing home pork to the district. You serve your district best by serving your country first, and I'll do that. And we're going to do it in the 2nd district. So that's what this is about. Who is the most electable conservative that's going to eliminate government waste, that is going to balance the budget, that is going to cut taxes? That's all this election is about. Now, all of these people are fine people. Don't get me wrong. I'm just looking at the landscape here and saying we've got some pretty tough competition coming up in the fall or next fall. Some well-funded Democrats. Somebody needs to take it to them. I think I'm up to the task. I think I'm ready for it. But I need your help. I need your help along the way. And you know what? This is our rendezvous with destiny. The time is now for you and I to actually make a change. The same thing happened in the late 70s with Reagan. He said, not going to elect an actor, not going to elect a guy on the radio. Reagan was on the radio. Isn't going to happen. He ushered in a Reagan revolution. That's what we're going to do. We're going to usher in a revolution that is not only going to change the country and Minnesota, but it's going to change the GOP for the better as well. That's on the agenda. So join me. Let's change Congress one district at a time. Go to jasonlewis2016.com and do your own research and get the facts on all the votes or all of my statements or anything else. And you know what? Let's all do it. And the first step would be abiding by the endorsement, which I am ready to do come next March. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gerson.
Thank you. If Mitch McConnell was a candidate on the stage, or if John Boehner or Lindsey Graham were here tonight as a candidate, they would all talk about how they support these conservative values. They would all say Obamacare has to go, that we need fiscal responsibility and must shrink the size and scope of the federal government. They would all oppose No Child Left Behind and Common Core. They would say that it was time to defund Planned Parenthood and end executive overreach. But how have they actually voted? What have they actually done different on these issues than the Democrats? I am not here tonight to beat up on Republicans. Democrats are the real enemy, but we can never beat the Democrats if our own Republican representatives won't stand up for our values. Talk is cheap. So tonight I am asking you not to judge us on what we have said about the issues. Rather, judge us on what we have done to fight for real change. 96% of congressional incumbents win re-election. I was in this fight when the odds were nearly impossible, when it wasn't an open seat. This has been a cause for me, not a political opportunity. Our grassroots community forced a 7-term incumbent to retire and then kept the 800-pound gorillas out of the race. And when it was safe, when there was little risk, and when the fight was already over, it became an opportunity for my opponents to advance their political careers. Is that what you are looking for in a representative? If you want a representative that will fight for your values no matter the cost, then I am the only candidate that you can trust because I have been in the trenches with you for 3 years. Few believe that we could hold our incumbent accountable, but together we reminded politicians that the people are really in charge, and there is no way after this long battle that we're going to let this grassroots movement be extinguished by political ambition. I am David Gerson, and I am going to Congress to restore people's faith in representative government. We, the people, no longer accept politics as usual, and we are going to take our country back.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Howe, you're up next, followed by Ms. Myra.
Well, I want to start off with thanking everybody that's here tonight. It's been a lively debate. Great. I hope you vote for somebody who lives amongst you and wants to represent you. You know, you all get that, right? Because Jason doesn't live in the district. You know, it's a typical top-down Washington thinking. I don't live with you, but I want to represent you, all right? He's got a great room presence. He can speak to any topic, right? The hit on me is I lost my Senate seat, right? Well, we lost the House and the Senate that year, both times. I know what defeat is like. What tells you who you are is when you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back on the horse again. I'm committed to winning this race. I've put a big financial stake of my own money into it. Our debt is uncontrollable. I guarantee you I'm going to go and work on our debt. That's my issue. I'm going to try and take care of it. Now, you could point and say, hey, you lost a Senate seat. Well, David's lost a congressional seat run. Jason, he ran for Congress out in Colorado. He lost that seat. You know, I've been around the country. What tells you who you are is if you lose a seat and you come back and win an election. I'm working every day to win this election. I need your help to win this election, and we can do it. We know what we're going to face on the other side. You need somebody who's conservative. You need somebody that we can bring in the independents. We can bring in the conservative Democrats. This issue is too important. We cannot lose this seat. I'm going to work every day to win it. You have any question, I have a record to run on. You call me. I'm not the guy that's going to tell you in the face, do one thing and say one thing and do another. If it comes out of my mouth, I own it. Because that's the way I grew up. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Myra.
We are at a crossroads. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a crossroads. Will we be honest with ourselves about the problems and challenges threatening the American dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? So many people believe that the American dream is slipping from their grasp. It doesn't need to be that way. Effective, conservative leadership can return our country to the shining city on the hill and can restore the American dream for our children and our grandchildren. It's not going to be easy. It'll be a lot of work. But I have the experience and the work ethic to fight that battle. Ladies and gentlemen, we know experience matters. I am a deeply concerned middle-class mother of three. I'm a certified public accountant. I'm a former two-term state representative. I'm a resident of the district and have been for over 40 years. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It is absolutely imperative, as conservatives, that we retain this seat. We can't talk our way to victory. We can't buy our way to victory. We must fight our way to victory. As your Congresswoman, I will fight for individual liberty. I will protect our Second Amendment rights. I will protect vulnerable, innocent human life. I will work to reduce the crushing burden of taxes and regulation. I will work to reduce our federal spending. And I will support and defend our U.S. Constitution. This election is about trust, who you will trust to represent you in Congress. I am that person. Thank you.
Thank you. And last word.
Thank you all very much for coming out tonight and for your participation and support. We need to win this district. It's absolutely essential. We need to take seats in the House, take seats in the Senate if we can, and absolutely win the presidency. I think that security is really going to be the major issue for winning over people who wouldn't now say that they know they're going to vote for us. And it is a drastic situation that we're in today. There's absolutely no reason that we would give powers of enrichment to Iran when they are absolutely one of our greatest enemies in the world. And there's no other country besides the 8 countries that have nuclear weapons today that has powers of enrichment. This president has, just like that, made terrible decisions throughout the world that destabilize the century to come for us. And it's not that we need to win with people who voted for this president. And they need to understand that they did not get what they paid for, what they bought, what they voted for. It's been a fraud.
Thank you, sir. I want to encourage us to thank these folks up here right now. I think this is a great group of candidates. I want to thank them all for being here tonight. I'm proud of the quality and variety of viewpoints and abilities we see here. This is going to be a great election season. Remember that the only thing that's more work than running for Congress is serving in Congress. Thank our candidates for being here tonight, for stepping up for leadership. Let's thank them again.